They thought I wouldn't remember. They were wrong. The night my son turned 40, he threw a lavish party, caterers, champagne towers, all for show. But what I remember most was the moment I saw my daughter-in-law hand him a pen behind her back and whisper, "Just get her upstairs." That's when my heart dropped, because I realized this wasn't a birthday party. It was a setup, a trap, and I was the prize. What they didn't know was, I'd already figured it out, and I wasn't just a guest at this party. I was the ghost they'd invited, the kind that haunts you when the truth hits. I wasn't always so cautious. Back when Jason was younger, I gave him a lot of chances. Helped him buy his first condo. Paid for his business degree. When his first company failed, I chalked it up to youth. When the second went under, I told myself he just needed more time. But after the third, and then the fourth, I stopped making excuses. Then came Amber. She walked into our lives wearing red stilettos and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The first time we met, she brought me a bottle of wine that still had the sales sticker on it. Told me she admired strong women, then spent the next 30 minutes talking about herself. Jason was completely enchanted. It didn't take long before the two of them started pitching me opportunities. Elaine, imagine crypto vending machines on every college campus. Mom, this VR goat farming app could revolutionize sustainable agriculture. Every time I politely declined, Amber would flash me that tight smile and say, "You're missing out on legacy, Elaine." No, Amber. I wasn't missing out on anything. I was protecting what I built. Jason started visiting less. When he did show up, it was always with some new pitch or excuse. I could feel the shift. Our conversations weren't about life anymore. They were about money. My money. Then came the final straw. A glossy, professionally printed brochure slid under my office door, pitching a luxury tiny home resort investment, featuring photos of a property I already owned. That's when I knew they weren't just delusional. They were scheming. I confronted Jason. He said it was a mistake. Said Amber's team got ahead of themselves. That I was overreacting. But I wasn't born yesterday. I saw the way he flinched when I mentioned legal boundaries. I noticed how Amber suddenly stopped calling me Mama E and started calling me Elaine. That's when I began keeping records. Emails, texts, voice memos. Every little inconsistency, every shady proposal, every quiet red flag they thought I wouldn't notice. Because if they were planning something, they clearly forgot who raised them. They forgot the woman who negotiated with banks while holding a baby in one arm and a ledger in the other. They forgot that behind the quiet widow was someone who knew exactly how to follow the money and expose it. And worst of all, they underestimated me. Jason's party was held at a rented modern villa on the edge of town. Glass walls, string lights, and people I didn't recognize dressed like they were auditioning for a tech startup commercial. I arrived alone, holding the gift I knew Jason wouldn't care about, a vintage watch my late husband once wore. Sentimental, sure, but not flashy enough for Jason. Amber greeted me with a glass of rose and a hug that felt more like a headlock. "So glad you came, Elaine. You always bring class to the room." I smiled politely, but my stomach tightened. I took the wine out of politeness, but didn't drink it. I was taught to trust my gut. And tonight, it was screaming. The room buzzed with business talk. One man handed me a business card and said, "Jason tells me you're signing over your equity next week? Congratulations on the transition." Transition. I didn't reply. Just nodded, made a mental note of his name, and walked away. Then Hannah found me. 17, sharp as a whip, and never afraid to call things as they were. She tugged on my sleeve and whispered, "Grandma, don't drink the wine." They were talking upstairs, Jason and Amber. "They think it'll make you sleepy. Something about just one signature after dessert. I looked into her eyes and saw the same fire I used to have at her age. "Okay," I whispered. "I won't." From that moment on, everything clicked into place like a dark puzzle. They weren't just scheming, they were prepared. They had papers, witnesses, even a notary, probably waiting behind one of those sliding doors. I watched as Jason smiled and laughed, clinking glasses with people who thought they were attending a celebration, not an ambush. And I realized he never invited me as a guest. He invited me as a target. Later that night, Amber tried to usher me upstairs with some excuse about showing me their new office setup. Jason followed with an iPad under his arm. I told them I had to step outside for some air. Instead, I called my lawyer. Then I called someone else, someone Jason had long forgotten existed. And I waited, because if they wanted to take something from me, they'd better be ready to lose everything first. I played my part like I was born for it. When Amber handed me that glass of champagne, I took a tiny sip, just enough to wet my lips. Then I wandered around with it, letting it evaporate into the air while pretending to sway just slightly on my feet. Jason watched me closely, smiling, but with too much eagerness behind his eyes, like a wolf pretending to be a Labrador. At one point, he leaned in and whispered, "Just one quick moment upstairs, Mom. We want to surprise you with something heartfelt." I nodded and let him lead me, my steps just a little wobbly, my eyes a little glassy, like I had one too many. Amber was already upstairs, holding a manila folder like it contained a treasure map. She'd even lit candles. Soft music played in the background. Everything about the setup was meant to feel warm, intimate, manipulative. Jason motioned toward the armchair. "Just sit. We'll read it together." I stumbled a little, muttered something about my purse, and bent down to gather it, while my fingers flicked on the voice recorder app, tucked deep inside a side pocket. Screen dark. Volume off. Then I sat back and waited. Amber opened the folder and started pointing at highlighted sections. "This just formalizes the asset transfer for tax purposes," she said sweetly. "You still keep control, in spirit." Jason chimed in. "We figured it was time to take some pressure off you, Mom. You've done enough. You deserve to rest." I stayed quiet. That's when Jason looked at Amber, chuckled, and muttered under his breath, "Just get the signatures tonight. She won't even remember tomorrow." Amber smirked. "She's old. She trusts us. This will hold up in court." And that was the moment I knew they'd already decided who I was, a fragile old woman. Easy. Disposable. I looked at them both and smiled, soft, vacant, like a woman who didn't know what was happening. But inside, I was making a list. Because I had just gotten everything I needed. The audio, the tone, the intent, their own words. When I excused myself to the restroom, I backed up the file to the cloud. Twice. And as I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a victim. I saw the woman who built a business from scratch. The woman who raised 2 children on grit and spreadsheets. And the woman who was about to make sure her son learned exactly what breach of trust really meant. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I made tea, sat at my kitchen table, and began cataloging everything. Receipts from old loans Jason begged for and never paid back. Investment pitches scribbled on napkins that I'd foolishly backed, each one worse than the last. Emails filled with promises, guilt trips, and veiled threats. I pulled out old folders, scanned every signature I ever gave, and cross-checked it with what I'd intended to sign. There were differences. Subtle. Dangerous. By sunrise, I had a war chest of evidence. Then I called Hannah. I didn't tell her everything right away. I just said I needed help organizing some files for the accountant. But Hannah was sharper than I gave her credit for. Halfway through sorting the mess, she looked up from an offshore wire transfer to Amber's name and whispered, "They've been laundering your money." I didn't flinch. Instead, I asked, "Do you want to help me stop them?" She nodded, without hesitation. Over the next 7 days, we worked like ghosts. Quiet. Unseen. We copied everything to encrypted drives. Created backups. We matched dates, pulled texts, synced timestamps on voice memos to financial withdrawals. We even got access to Amber's business email, thanks to Hannah's friend, who owed her a favor and knew a thing or two about ethical hacking. What we found: Amber had been taking money from my company's vendor accounts, small amounts, but over time it added up. Tens of thousands, enough to draw legal scrutiny. So I compiled 3 neat, tidy envelopes. Each one included a cover letter, written in simple language. "These documents may be of interest to you. No return address." Envelope 1 went to Jason's business partner, a man I knew cared deeply about his reputation. Inside, voice recordings of Jason admitting he planned to manipulate legal signatures, and bank statements linking him to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Envelope 2 went to Amber's HR department. Inside, forged documents with her name, proof of money siphoning, and a screenshot of an email where she referred to her job as a convenient front. Envelope 3 went to a journalist I'd once helped with a zoning issue years ago. He owed me. And more importantly, he hated corporate fraud. I didn't ask them to destroy Jason and Amber. I didn't need to. I just handed them the truth, wrapped in their own words, signed in their own ink, and waited for it to do what the truth always does: break the silence. It didn't take long. 3 days after those envelopes landed, Jason's name disappeared from his company website. His business partner didn't bother to call. He simply pulled the plug on their latest venture and issued a statement about breach of trust. Investors followed suit like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Turns out, no one likes doing business with a man caught whispering about forged signatures and offshore accounts. Amber didn't fare much better. Her company placed her on indefinite administrative leave, pending a formal ethics review. Word spread faster than fire through dry brush. 1 week she was leading brand partnerships. The next, her keycard didn't work at the front door. And just like that, their perfect image cracked like glass under a hammer. I thought they might lie low. But no. They stormed into my house one evening, red-faced, voices raised, rage leaking from every pore. "You ruined everything," Jason shouted. Amber threw down a stack of papers, copies of the files I'd mailed. "You think this makes you the hero? This is family you're destroying." I stood, calm, unshaken, and I said what had been sitting on my chest for years. "I didn't destroy anything. I simply stopped pretending your lies were love." Jason's mouth opened, closed, like a man choking on air. Amber looked stunned, like I'd slapped her without lifting a finger. "You want to talk betrayal?" I continued. "You drugged my wine and waved contracts in my face while calling me senile behind my back. That's not betrayal. That's war." They stared at me like I was a stranger. And maybe I finally was, the version of me who didn't flinch, who didn't beg to be respected, who had drawn the line and dared them to cross it again. They left without another word. No apologies. No promises. Just silence. And that was a gift. That night I made tea. Chamomile. Strong. I took it to the porch where Hannah was already waiting, wrapped in a blanket, eyes tired but calm. We didn't talk much. Just watched the sky dim into a soft lavender dusk. Freedom didn't feel loud. It felt like quiet breathing, like stillness without fear. Like knowing I would never again be manipulated under the guise of love. And for the first time in years, I felt the weight lift off my chest. Not because I'd hurt them, but because I finally chose me. If someone you love uses your loyalty against you, let this be your reminder. Love without honesty is just control dressed in kindness. You don't owe silence to people who've used your trust like currency. You don't have to shout, beg, or break things. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is clarity, knowing who you are, what you stand for, and refusing to be used again. If you've ever been the one who finally said, "Enough," we want to hear your story. You're not alone, and your strength might just be someone else's inspiration. Subscribe now for more raw, real revenge stories where the quiet ones rise, and justice always comes knocking.